morning, everyone. It's my very great pleasure to welcome you here to the 2024 RSA Winter Conference. My name is John Harrison, and I'm the RSA board member with responsibility for the conference and events portfolio. So if you enjoy the event, let me repeat, my name is John Harrison. Okay? If you don't enjoy the event, I'm sure you will, okay, forget my name. All right. So one of my highlights in this role here with the RSA is I get to do things like this. But while I get to stand here, this event really is a big team effort. And really, I can't stand here without acknowledging right from the outset the fantastic work of the RSA conference events team, and in particular to name check Nikki, Lisa, Alex, for the enormous amount of work that they do to get us here to enjoy the 2 days that we have ahead of us. Also to Alan and the RSA board, and through to the staff here at the Cumberland Hotel. But most importantly to you, our attendees, our members, because without you there is no event, and without you there is no Regional Studies Association. I am therefore delighted to say that we have over 225 people registered for this year's event, ranging from students to professors, from the academic, policy and practitioner communities. At the RSA, we pride ourselves on being a welcoming and inclusive association. Over the next 2 days, 165 papers will be presented, and it's a truly international event. This year, we are welcoming people from over 30 countries, including those who've travelled long distances from places like New Zealand, Australia, Japan, Brazil, Mexico, India, and many who have joined us from North America. I also could not be prouder that once again we have a gender-balanced event. This is not the first RSA event where we've got 50-50 between male and female attendees. Over the last few years, we're very proud of the fact that the events that we run do present an inclusive environment. So as I say this, Alan and I are on the stage here in a minority when it comes to this event. There are over 115 female delegates, which is about 52% of people attending. And as I will shortly introduce, Alan is the sole male representative in the 3 main leadership positions within the association. We recognise that as an association we still have a lot of work to do in other areas of our activity and why we're always looking forward. But I am proud to stand here today as a representative of the RSA board and of this event to proudly say that we are committed to and are delivering that change. Speaking of looking to the future, this year's event is all about that. Now, the original plan, and that we all know about best laid plans, but months ago when we started to put together this conference, in recent times we've had various titles, things like Turbulent Times, Regions in Recovery, thinking about things like COVID, thinking about things like Brexit, thinking about geopolitical turmoil and crises. So this year's conference was deliberately going to be upbeat. Okay? So it's about driving regions forward, transitioning to brighter regional futures. Then we all woke up yesterday morning. So all best laid plans. But many of you will know I'm a big Tottenham Hotspur football fan. So in that position, you have to be one of life's eternal optimists because they always let you down. What is going on in the world around us just makes our work and the core mission at the RSA even more important. Regional policies, planning and governance are all underpinned by a desire to offer better options, opportunities and solutions to drive regions forward in their development. The core themes of innovation, entrepreneurship, skills, technology, trade, investment are some of the many enablers of regional change and regional development. Our focus on issues of housing, migration, land use, mobility are all driven by a desire to improve the lives of people and places that we inhabit. And as a community, improvements to equity, diversity and inclusion and the drive to enthuse the next generation of regional researchers and practitioners is at the very heart of everything we do. This is what we're going to do over the next 2 days, and it is with that the RSA is committed to doing going forward. And what can be more upbeat than a birthday? Next year in 2025, the RSA celebrates its 60th anniversary or birthday. We are also at a pivotal time in the development of the association. We have a new chief executive, the first in a generation, a new president and a new chair. So in a break with tradition, this year's opening plenary is a discussion on the future of the RSA. It will offer an insight into how the RSA is starting to plan, in the spirit of the conference name, to drive regions forward and transition to brighter regional futures. The format of this opening session is that we've asked the leadership team of the RSA to share in the first part their vision and aspiration for driving regions, regional studies and the association forwards. Each are going to present for 10 minutes. There's an opening kind of pitch. Then there's an interactive part where they'll be asking a few questions of us because we want to have participation of you, the delegates at this event. Now, I'm assured that no one needs to download anything. You just need a smartphone with a camera when the time comes. There then should be time for about 20 minutes or so of questions and answers where the three panelists will be able to address those for you. So the three people that you've seen start here patiently, sitting there while I've done this introductory presentation, it's exciting times because all three are new in role. So let me introduce them to you. Firstly, we have Heike. Heike is the president of the Regional Studies Association and professor of economic geography at the University of Bern in Switzerland. Her research is in local and regional economic development with a focus on dynamics of innovation and entrepreneurship, placemaking and sustainability. Jumping to the end, we then have Alan Kinder. Alan is the chief executive of the RSA and general manager of RSA Europe. He joined the RSA in February 2024. So this time last year, he was attending his first winter conference as an observer. He's now officially in role. There is no escape. Okay, so Alan is here. And Alan's background is as a geographer and a geography educator. I'm a geographer. Fantastic to have you, Alan.
Good to be here.
So Alan's background is that he led the Geographical Association for over 11 years before joining the RSA and played an active role in national and international education policy for over 20 years. Alan's key responsibilities are basically everything. As the chief executive of the RSA, everything goes through Alan, but really it's the strategic and organisational leadership, securing the sustainable development of the RSA and RSA Europe. In the middle, we have Sarah Ayres. Now, drum roll please, because on the previous slide, it said treasurer. But as of yesterday, Sarah is the new chair of the Regional Studies Association. So Sarah's day job is as Professor of Public Policy and Governance at the University of Bristol. Sarah is a political scientist with expertise in public administration and theories of policy making. Her research is concerned with territorial and collaborative governance, in particular how actors from state, market and civil society coalesce and work with one another in specific localities. If that's the long version of their introductions, we have the President, Chief Executive and Chair of the RSA in front of you this morning. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Heike, who's going to open the presentations.
Yeah, thank you very much, John, for this very kind introduction. Thank you all for coming today to London. Thank you to the RSA staff for organizing this event. I think this is deserving a round of applause for their efforts to organize such wonderful events for the RSA. Thank you very much. I would also like to welcome you to the RSA Winter Conference. The theme of this year's conference is indeed upbeat, driving regions forward, transitioning to brighter regional futures. It is a theme that we need more than ever because of a positive agenda for regional change and development is necessary given the multiple crises cities and regions are facing. It is a privilege, but also an honorable task to serve the Regional Studies Association as its new president. I would like to thank John Agnew for his work as the RSA president in the past several years. In my view, the RSA is a wonderful community of scholars who care about the future of our cities and regions. For me, the RSA is an organization that strives to be inclusive, international, and interdisciplinary, values that we need for a brighter future. I came rather late to the RSA in my academic career. I received a PhD in urban studies in the early 2000s from Portland State in the United States and moved to Virginia Tech for an assistant professorship in urban affairs and planning. In these years, I hung out with urban planners in the United States and not so much with regional studies scholars. When I moved to Switzerland, and remember this is always the white sort of spot on the EU maps, about 15 years ago, I started to join the RSA Association and really never regretted this decision. There were two reasons for me to join this community of scholars. One was that I didn't want to fly anymore to the United States for conferencing, and I wanted to keep my footprint small. The other reason was the closeness of the RSA to policymaking and the networks that it helps to form between academics and policymakers. My research focuses on innovation and entrepreneurship, and particularly on the context of small and medium-sized towns, rural and mountain regions. I'm strongly engaged with policymaking in Switzerland and helped to redefine its approach to fostering sustainable development in rural and mountain regions. For the past 12 years, I was a member and also a president of an extra-parliamentary commission in Switzerland that advises the federal government. Through this work, and also together with my colleagues in Switzerland who are part of the RSA, we were able to initiate a change in dialogue about regional development that goes beyond the traditional economic growth paradigm. Some of the issues that we've been successfully implementing are that social innovations are now officially recognized in the Swiss new regional policy, and we were able to define peripheries in a more positive way. And I hope that policymakers in Switzerland in the future look at peripheries more positively and not just as left behind places. So much of my academic work has been driven by the need to translate research results into practice and to engage with policymaking. Last year, I took another step in my academic career because I noticed I wanted to also change academic practice and politics. You may say that I moved over to the dark side because I was appointed as a vice rector for quality and sustainable development at my university. I'm now in charge of quality assessment, equal opportunity, and sustainable development of the institution. I'm confronted now with questions how to evaluate academic excellence and how we can move beyond mere rankings and how to value a broader range of research impacts. I'm also asking questions about how we can make academia more diverse and increase opportunities not only for women, but also for first-generation students and professors and lecturers. And I'm confronted with the question of how our university can contribute to climate neutrality and the ambitious goal of becoming net zero. Sometimes I really despair at these tasks, and you don't want to know the dark side, not just of university administration, but also the dark side of what happens sometimes in research groups. But most of the time I draw a lot of energy from this work, and I benefit from insights on all these topics from you, particularly when it comes to the role of the university in regional development. When I started as a vice rector, our university had the goal of becoming climate neutral by the end of next year. Now, this would have meant that we buy climate certificates on the market for about 8,000 tons of CO2. Now, you all know that this approach is not very effective, and I was able to halt it and convince the university leadership to take another approach. We now are in the process of developing a climate neutrality roadmap. Now, this is not new, but what is new is that we will not compensate all of our emissions on the market in a traditional way. Rather, we will take a leap and will fund transdisciplinary projects that move us further on the road of transforming our communities towards more sustainability. My hope is that I will instill a culture of research at my university that engages with society and where knowledge is co-created. We call this project Engaged University of Bern. We will still compensate our emissions from flights, but at the same time we will put emphasis on alternative ways to contribute in a more positive way in the sense of a handprint project. In addition, we call the academic community to think hard about reduction measures in all areas, ranging from making labs more green to reducing flights to conferences or to fieldwork. You don't imagine how much resistance I get from this new approach and asking questions about how to reduce flying in academia. Why do we need to take such efforts in our own academic practice? Why do we need to take them serious? Why do universities, but also academic associations like the RSA, take the net zero goal and engage scholarship seriously? It is my belief that we need to invest in these two areas for several reasons. Since the COVID pandemic, we are back at doing business as usual. In Bern, we are now back at the same level of flying than we were 2019. No changes. Yet, climate and biodiversity crisis show us on a weekly basis that we need to make changes in the way we live and work. In March of this year, there were floodings in southern Germany, where I come from, that not only caused a lot of damage to buildings and infrastructure, but also took lives. In August, just a few kilometers from my house in Switzerland, there was a huge landslide. Luckily, only infrastructure was damaged. And you all know what happened in Spain last week. And we see increasing attacks on academia and increasing doubts about academic knowledge. In Switzerland, media and politicians are increasingly attacking academia, and this comes at a time when we face also financial pressures and budget cuts. So academia needs new ways to engage with society and policy making. So what to do from here? This is a pretty bleak picture, but the conference theme is positive and upbeat and forward-looking. And I would like to end on a positive note. I see 4 topics that are critically important for the RSA and for the regional studies community at large. These 4 topics raise questions and they are up for debate. They may represent a more normative turn in our academic work and practice, and they will certainly be debated. First, we need to embrace more seriously the limits of economic development, particularly when it comes to planetary boundaries. This means that we need to set an agenda for research that takes the environment more serious. Second, how can we embrace planetary boundaries in our own academic practices? How can we effectively lower our own carbon footprint? What are the opportunities and challenges of addressing carbon neutrality and net zero goals seriously? Can we find ways to reduce our footprint? Can we use, for example, local hub conferences while at the same time meeting in other places? Can we take the time to travel to London by train? Third, how can we engage with society? Do we need different methods like living labs, real-world laboratories, future visioning? In what ways can we engage in constant transdisciplinary exchange and collaboration with stakeholders? How can we as an institution, but also as an association, support this kind of work? Because it's hard work, it takes time, and it's sometimes not considered to be academic and also attacked even from within our own community. Fourth, how can we be, as an association, more socially sustainable? How can we be even more inclusive and diverse? How can we promote inclusive practices while at the same time addressing the other goals that I just outlined in terms of ecological sustainability? These are questions, by no means a proposal or a plan for action. But I think that they will be very important in the future for our own individual work and practice, for the practice of the institutions that employ us, and for the urban and regional communities we live and work in. So I look forward to working on these questions throughout the strategy process. I look forward to working with Sarah and Alan, and I look forward to also including you in this work, because it's very important to be inclusive in forward future visioning strategy processes. So thank you very much, and I hand over to Sarah.
So good morning, everybody. I have to say, of course, it's an absolute honour and privilege to be elected as chair of the Regional Studies Association. It's an association really close to my heart, and I introduced myself to the RSA about 20 years ago at a conference in Angers in France. And if someone had said to me then, in 20 years' time, you'll be chair of the RSA, I wouldn't have believed it. But my journey represents the values at the heart of the RSA. I was an early career researcher working on a funded project, warmly welcomed into an established community. I had the chance to build my contacts and networks through RSA conferences and events. I published in the RSA's journals and was awarded funding as part of its grant schemes. Our previous chief executive, Sally Hardy, saw me presenting at a London conference, and she introduced herself to me, and shortly after I was asked to sit on the board as treasurer and trustee, and that was in 2013. And now I have the privilege to serve as chair for the next 3 years. So the RSA has played a prominent part in my own professional development and career opportunities, and these are the values that we want to develop moving forward for the benefit of all our community, from our brilliant PhD students to our academic international superstars. The RSA has so much to offer, whatever your career stage. I remember 20 years ago thinking that the RSA was a home for economists, geographers, and a few political scientists like myself. But I know from recent experience that we are now a much more diverse community than ever before in terms of geographical coverage, but also discipline. So at a meeting of early career scholars at our conference in Florence in June, I met sociologists, anthropologists, public health experts. I also met colleagues from Kazakhstan and Nigeria who had taken the time to attend a European conference. That vibrancy and diversity is to be welcomed, and it's an element I really enjoy as a scholar. So I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce myself and what I hope to bring to the role as chair. I'll share my personal views on what I see as some of the opportunities and challenges facing the association in its 60th year. I am mindful that my own disciplinary background and experience shapes my view of the association and the field. And over the next year, we really want to reach out to our membership and our community to feed into the values and our strategy moving forward. So I'm a public policy scholar, interested in theories of policy making, governance, networks. Much of my work has explored the process of English devolution in the UK. And I describe myself as a transdisciplinary scholar with experience of working across different disciplines and non-academic communities, trying to find solutions to society's complex challenges. So I'm currently working on a large research grant called TRUDE, tackling the root causes upstream of unhealthy urban development. And that project is looking at how we can make better urban development decisions so that health outcomes feature before it's too late. The project includes a range of disciplines working together to try and create healthier cities for people to live and work. So I've been working with over 40 scholars from economics, engineering, law, public health, psychology, planning, management, and we're bringing all our collective expertise to bear on that problem space. I've learnt a huge amount over the last 5 years on that project, and I really feel that working with such diversity is not easy, but it's hugely rewarding and illuminating. So working across disciplines and with non-academic partners takes time, patience, goodwill, and humility. And in my view, there's no substitute for face-to-face communication. I've had to be confident and bullish in the areas where I have expertise and knowledge. I've also had to get comfortable with what I don't know and look to other team members for support. And again, that investment of time has been considerable, but the rewards have been better than expected. And I strongly feel that there's lessons there that I can learn and bring to the role as chair. I truly believe that we can only solve society's complex challenges if we work together as a regional studies community. Things like climate change, health inequalities, the migration crisis. We also need to demonstrate the public value of our work by extending the traction and influence of our expertise, by reaching out to fields like the hard sciences, medicine and engineering. We need to ensure that our excellent science is applied in the non-academic world to politics, business, media and social debate, and I look forward to championing that agenda. I was heartened to hear what you had to say about that, Heike. I think we'll make a good team. And in terms of the challenges, the academic sector is a pretty brutal environment. Universities in many parts of the world are facing financial pressures, leading to ever more pressures on academics to do more for less. Publishing in reputable journals is harder than ever before, more competitive. Grant income is often hard to come by. So in the UK, by way of example, some government-funded grants, the success rate is as low as 3%. Great work is not getting through. So to some degree, we're dealing with the business of rejection from journals, from grant applications, and most seasoned scholars I know actually have had more failures than successes. And as one of my most esteemed colleagues once told me, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. And that made me feel better at the time. So as scholars and as an association, we have to be pretty resilient and strategic in how we focus our time and our efforts. And within this challenging context, I'm mindful that the RSA relies on the expertise, goodwill, dedication and commitment of our members as volunteers. A key challenge for us will be to retain the goodwill and commitment of those members who give up their time to service the different needs of our community. And that includes journal editors and boards, people in the room who give up their time to undertake timely reviews, the people on our research committees handing out our research grants. Whether they're early careers or established scholars, they are always the best and most appropriate people in the field to undertake the task. And moving forward, we need to be mindful of nurturing and supporting that most valuable asset in an environment where dedicating one's time is ever more challenging. And in the spirit of the conference, let's end with the opportunities. And I really do believe that our biggest asset is our community and our members. I salute the dedication of our volunteers across the different operations of the RSA board, the board of RSA Europe, our various committees, the territorial representatives in different parts of the world, India, China, Latin America, our team of global ambassadors who ensure that the RSA is represented around the world. I salute our conference delegates who've come back in earnest since the pandemic. We've had the biggest conferences we've ever had over recent years. And a thanks to you, John, our events coordinator on the board, who's worked so hard on our events. I feel that there's a real appetite for dialogue, networking, face-to-face contact in our community. That has to be balanced with our sustainability commitments, of course. We know that finding the time and resource to attend conferences and being away from your families is a sacrifice, but it is pivotal to the success and vibrancy of the RSA moving forward. And I really do thank you for your investment of time. We also have to recognise the legacy, hard work and dedication of our previous chief executive, Sally Hardy, who devoted over 36 years' service to the association. She really was pivotal in the development of our global networks, social contacts and membership. And I look to honour Sally's legacy by trying to ensure that no matter where in the world our members might be, their scholarship will have a chance to shine through the opportunities afforded by the RSA. And then moving forward, under the stewardship of our new Chief Executive, Alan Kinder, we can remain a proactive and professional association that places a commitment to scientific excellence at its heart. Because without that, we have no legitimacy. We have to maintain our prominence as the preeminent association representing the field of regional studies in all its guises. We will continue to be an open, transparent and welcoming association fit for business in an increasingly challenging academic and social environment. Thank you. And I I should have introduced, Alan Kinder, Chief Executive.
Good morning, everybody. Well, I'd like to start, of course, by thanking Heike and Sarah for sharing their thoughts about the future of the RSA. I'd like to build on their ideas in a moment. Before I come to that, my starting point, I think, is complementary to that of Sarah and Heike. When I introduced myself at the closing plenary of last year's conference, it was in this very room, I did make clear that my background, as John said, is in geographical education and also in the leadership of membership associations. John was polite enough not to say, in other words, I'm not a regional researcher. Although I have shared your commitment to place knowledge, professional community, and to working at the intersections of policy, practice and research throughout my career. So standing here today, I feel ever more closely aligned with the RSA's charitable mission. At the same time, I do hope to bring a fresh perspective on how we might pursue it. So since arriving in post in February, I've made what I hope is good use of the privilege of my position to talk with staff, with board members, editors, territorial ambassadors, conference delegates, and others about their perspectives on the RSA. I hope I've gained a good sense of the achievements, the resources and capabilities of the association, the things that we might cherish or change as we move forwards, and personally I found it an absolutely fascinating and sometimes rather overwhelming, but a very rewarding few months. And I'd like to thank everybody actually I've spoken with over the course of time since February. My private conversations are now being bolstered by two more formal exercises. So at last June's board meeting in Florence, and over the summer, we invited staff and board members to make observations about the trends they feel are likely to influence our work more broadly in the years to come, be they in academia, policy making, or in society. In October, we published this work in the form of an RSA blog, and thanks to Alex for helping with that. It's called Horizon Scanning, and you can still find it on our website. The invitation to read it and respond to it is still open, and you can find out how to do that when you read the blog. Secondly, since September, with the help of several of our board members, we've also begun convening a number of focus groups with the aim of holding at least 10 one-hour sessions by December, and we're now halfway towards that target, I'm pleased to say. We've taken care to include people at different career stages, those involved in our territorial and research networks, and those with particularly valuable perspectives that we need to hear, such as members of our women's network. So I'd like to share with you, if I may, a distillation of some of the themes emerging from all of this talking and listening before turning to the implications for the RSA as I see them. And let's just move on firstly then to what people are telling us about the value that they ascribe to the RSA. So firstly, our interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary nature is seen as an essential part of our DNA, and that won't surprise you to hear. Most people experience the association as a supportive and approachable community, and these aren't things that are taken for granted when it comes to academic and professional societies. For many people, these two things, interdisciplinarity and openness, are seen as reinforcing one another. The opportunity to build relationships, indeed the word friendships is often used, is widely described as the most valuable feature of the RSA community. And people value those human relationships for their own sake, but also because they produce the trust that's a prerequisite for co-creating and sharing knowledge with others. In addition, the moral support that comes from being part of a like-minded community is, we are told, absolutely essential and recognised as sustaining people over the course of a career. Many of the people we've spoken to also acknowledged that researchers, in this field often come to regional or urban studies at master's level or later, and Heike made a reference to her own story there. So for this reason, particular value is attached to the way the RSA helps shape researcher identity, so for example through research networks, and also helps to give voice to people and to ideas. So through presenting at a conference, for example, or authoring an article. And connected to that point, the range of the RSA support that we offer to PhD students and those early in their careers really does stand out in the feedback that we've been receiving. And it's something that people at all stages of their career value, not only those who are in the early stages. And finally, in terms of this sort of bullet-pointed approach, people value the dialogues that the RSA helps to create across international borders and between researchers and policymakers. And on that second point, it's remarkable how often people talk to us about how the desire to make a difference is really cited as their motivation for being a researcher and conducting research in the first place, as well as for being involved in the RSA. So, turning now to some words of advice. We have also been talking to people about those aspects of the RSA's support that they use less often, they see as less valuable, or perhaps where they see a need to change. People were very polite in what they said, by the way, but hence the term words of advice. Positive feedback. Policy influence emerges as a really interesting area here. So many people recognise that one of the aims of the RSA, the reasons for its foundation, was to have policy impact. And there are numerous examples where this is happening and has happened successfully. Nevertheless, some really searching and strategic questions are being posed for us here, with people wondering what our ambition looks like in this space now that we operate globally. Secondly, the success of the RSA in transforming itself from a UK to an international association is a source of energy and real pride. Nevertheless, concerns remain about UK centricity and Eurocentricity, and the need to widen participation and broaden representation. The difficult trade-off between the desire to meet people face to face and the environmental and financial costs of attending conferences is being keenly felt right across our community. And again, that won't surprise you to hear. And the RSA is being urged to think about the implications of that. While many people value the RSA's online offer, and they do see it as being very inclusive, some find it impossible to ring-fence the time, particularly if those events or activities are free. What one focus member called the curse of the webinar. I think one or two of you might recognise that dilemma. RSA grants also attract praise, but also improvement advice in equal measure. Could they be increased in value? Could they be used more strategically? Could they be made easier to apply for? And finally, and very interesting for me as a chief executive, the sheer breadth of the RSA's offer is presenting a challenge to some of our members. Some people feel overwhelmed by it and by our communications about it. More than one person wondered aloud whether let 1,000 flowers bloom is actually the best strategy for advancing regional knowledge and research. A very interesting question, I think. So we're just beginning to think about what the RSA needs to do and to do differently to ensure it continues to advance regional knowledge in the future. Firstly, I would suggest that we need to build on the attributes that we have as an organisation that have served us so well and have come so clearly across from Sarah and Heike's input today, but that we need to put these at the heart of our conversations and use them to guide all that we do. So interdisciplinarity, community, collaboration, equity, diversity, inclusiveness, openness, transparency, environmental responsibility and social impact, these are rather powerful words that we need to think carefully about mobilising. They're things that people should see and feel, whether you work for the RSA, serve on its board, or attend a conference for the very first time. Secondly, I suggest that a sense is just beginning to emerge of the strategic goals or objectives that we might be thinking of setting ourselves for the next phase of our mission into and beyond our diamond anniversary year. This could be for the RSA to become the go-to organisation for regional and urban research globally. And I think that might mean that we make sure that more practitioners and policymakers, as well as researchers, know about us, get what we stand for, and trust in what we say and do. There could be a goal around driving policy and practice agendas. In other words, really ensuring that research today becomes policy tomorrow. And another potential goal could be around becoming a larger, more international, and more diverse membership organisation. We haven't yet done much work on the mechanisms, if you like, for achieving these potential goals, or on the metrics for assessing our success in progressing. And I hope you'll see that's for understandable reasons. However, I'm going to suggest this morning that we need to think carefully about a few things. Firstly, finding ways to make use of our collective intelligence and to mobilise the vast knowledge base that we've created. This could mean identifying really compelling cases where the RSA can show that it's a champion for regions, or producing collections of evidence for specific purposes, or defining and addressing at an organisational level questions of societal importance. Secondly, I'm suggesting too that convening researchers and policymakers together and helping with knowledge translation, potentially in new ways, could be something we think about very carefully. Of course, here we do want to acknowledge that the RSA will continue to be about and to support critical and problem-defining research. But at the same time, as an organisation, we also want to engage policymakers and to provide them with authoritative and actionable outputs of our research. Decentralising is another watchword I'm sharing with you this morning. I think that some of our decision-making processes and indeed some of our resources may be deployed slightly differently in future. We could think about enabling our network leaders and our territorial networks in particular to do their work with greater autonomy. Perhaps we could think about creating more informal networks that don't depend on the centre, so to speak, for their operations. And as we come towards the close of my piece here, I think that seeking and securing joint projects and collaborations is only likely to be something that we seek to increase in the future. And finally, returning quite rightly to the membership, personalising and targeting our support, making it navigable and intelligible to people, is something that we could think very carefully about, potentially through the use of technology. So just to finish then, in terms of next steps, just a brief sketch, I suppose, our aim, as we've all made clear, is to produce a new RSA strategy by the end of next year. That's our 60th anniversary year. Our working assumption, as you may have picked up from the abstract, is that this will cover the period 2025 to 2030. And there are a minimum of 3 board meetings between now and next December. February, April and November. So after today's session, which in itself plays an important role in consultation, we anticipate further opportunities to consult with members on this emerging strategy during the first half of 2025, and ideally around the time of the final draft, which we very much hope will be there in place in October, November. So this year's conference next year could be a rather pivotal moment. Watch this space. So look, thank you for listening, and all 3 of us very much look forward to hearing your questions. I think I'll pass back to our chair.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So what we'll do is we'll jump to the kind of Q&A. It's framed as Q&A, but really this is an opportunity for comments, for questions, for suggestions, For challenges, because we do want this to be kind of an open and transparent process, and also to really get a sense of people's views. What I do want to really stress in this discussion is this is not just about members, so members or non-members, whether you're a student, an early career researcher, mid-career, senior, whether this is your first engagement with the RSA or you're a seasoned attendee at our events, academics, policymakers, practitioners, everyone's views is important because we do want this to be kind of representative of the direction that you want to see the RSA going in the years ahead. So we have about 20 minutes for comments, questions, and we've got two roving mics. So if you can put your hand up, I'll come to different people, and then if you can just wait for the microphone and introduce yourself, and then either ask a question for all three of the panelists, or you can target your question at one of them. So can we...
Yeah, thank you very much. Michiel van Meter, Utrecht University in the Netherlands. When reflecting on your introductions, I feel there's some part of the secret sauce missing, and I think that's actually where we might want to have some debate about. So you were talking about we need more strong engagement with policy, but we haven't given much thought to the mechanisms. Where I would say they're the mechanisms that are crucial. Do we have an idea what the mechanisms are, and what is the best model how to engage with policy? And I think that's very much related to another open question that there was in the presentation. It's about facilitating the role of the RSA as a translator between research and policy. But that's also an easy word to say. You know, what's the language of translation? What's the language we need to learn as researchers in order to actually be able to speak to policymakers? And perhaps slightly more controversial, would the policymakers need to learn some additional language in order to understand us?
Thank you very much, Michiel. I'll hand it to the panel if one or more of you would like to respond.
Yes, okay. Thank you for the question. I mean, the process of engaged scholarship is close to my heart, and I know that we do brilliant work already as a community. We see it in the publications. We've got a Policy Expo book series, which is all about practice-orientated feedback for policymakers. We have a new initiative with the Regional Studies Association in the UK, working closely with the government department, setting up seminars for our scholars to go into government on particular topics. And at the board meeting yesterday, I don't think I'm announcing anything too soon, but we want to explore the possibility of setting that up with our territorial ambassadors in different parts of the world. So we know there's lots of good work to build on, but we are really interested in hearing from the room, from our community, about what are we not picking up? You know, what are people doing already that we can expand on? How can we connect our scholars in different parts of the world so that we are bigger than the sum of our parts? We know that most often policy engagement might happen at a local, regional, national level, but could we act as more as a community to bring that transatlantic or kind of global dimension to what we do? So we're really presenting ourselves to the world as a global, engaged community ready to deal with some of the society and global big challenges. So that's the thinking, but we are all ears for suggestions.
Well, thank you for the question. Yeah, maybe the only thing I would add is that we are not short of experiences and ideas. We're not short of secret source. The question for us strategically as an organisation is which of those approaches, models, indeed tactics, are the ones that really deserve a strategic push and the resources behind them. So it isn't a question of us not knowing or having experience in this area. It really is a question of where does that sit within strategy. I think that's what I was getting at with mechanisms rather than a lack of knowledge.
Yeah, and I find your question about, you know, the policymakers who might also need a different language or a different capacity to take on academic knowledge very interesting. And in my own context, we have actually, in addition to the network, to the territorial network, another learning association. It's kind of a regional studies Swiss association, Actually, they have been able to manage the exchange very well with workshops, short formats in Bern, you know, a place where everybody can reach quite successfully, where we are near policy making. And there I see that policymakers come because they really appreciate the inputs that they get on, you know, topics that are up to date, that are researched on. And I think maybe thinking about these kind of, you know, national exchanges would be interesting to kind of more explore.
Thank you, Michiel, for the question. Just the thought of secret sources, it's got me going. So, anybody else? Open the floor. Yeah. So, I think the microphone wasn't necessarily picking up as well as maybe we would like. So, maybe if I can just paraphrase the question so everyone in the room can hear. So, the question was really about the kind of the RSA and its kind of transdisciplinary focus, and a focus particularly thinking about kind of connections into creating and design and co-creating projects, which was then pitched back as a challenge to somewhat to degree to Heike about the challenge of co-design and the sense that within some parts of the academic community there's a question about the credibility of some types of that type of research.
Maybe just two quick answers. One is anecdotal. I think if we want to increase this exchange, we can't meet like that. We need different spaces, different ways of engaging. Just anecdotally, we just had a person from Karlsruhe. They have a very interesting approach to real-world laboratories in Karlsruhe from the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. And he said, we use too much language. We use too much written stuff. And maybe using different ways of engagement beyond language. And language is at our core, so it's very difficult for me to think about what would be the other ways of communicating. But he said clearly that their engagement with the neighborhood, with policy making at the very neighborhood level, needs to go beyond language. And the second one, I think there is a growing community that address transdisciplinary research is research. It's a scientific method, and that needs to be in the forefront if we do this kind of work. So there needs to be reflection, all these standards that we have. But there's an increasing opportunity also in associations that are developing, journals that are developing in that field, where you can publish this research. And perhaps for us, it would be also worthwhile to think about how can we address or how can we create formats where we can publish this kind of work. And this kind of work is messy, takes a lot of time. And sometimes it's not that, it doesn't go as planned. And it's really a difficult question because we need more open minds for that. Yeah.
Just 2 quick points. I think they're great questions. One was about, I think you mentioned about whether policymakers, how they digest and how we translate transdisciplinary work. And again, speaking anecdotally, when we went into government with our big project presenting our transdisciplinary work, the public narrative was, yes, we're working in systems, it's mission orientated, this is the kind of drive, this is the kind of research we want. And then when we dropped the performativity of it, the quiet conversation was, we don't quite know what we're doing with systems thinking and mission orientated, and there was a sort of honest translation element. I think it comes back to our colleague's point here about can we gather this experience that we're having in our translation and share it as a community. And then the second point, I think you raise another really good point, which is about where and how do you publish this work, which isn't always seen as the priority for disciplinary focused journals. And I had lunch with an esteemed colleague in the room yesterday who's also doing transdisciplinary work. And I said, well, where do you get your work published? And we were both of the view, it's in the suite of RSA journals. If you look at regional studies, actually it's really open to transdisciplinary work with accounting, from medicine, those kind of features. So I think we have a good journals output base for the community to use for this kind of work.
I'll just make a very brief comment. I won't. I think that the question's been answered very well by colleagues here. But I think the value of us creating an open session this morning is being demonstrated here. Your use of the phrase co-construction isn't one that I had used in my presentation, but but it's a really important point to raise. So thank you for doing that, and I've certainly noted that as something that we need to also take away and put into the conversation.
Thank you. Okay, my plan now is if we take maybe 3 questions, and then maybe the 3 panellists, you take one of the questions each, and we can get through a few more. So there's a hand there, Nikki, in the central aisle, about 3 rows from the back. If anybody else can put their hand up, then we can get the other microphone to you. Okay. So Sam, can you just come to the front
Thank you.
please?
I'm an early career researcher, first time at the RSA. So my question is, I'm really encouraged by your emphasis on working with policymakers. But as an early career researcher, and I'm a practitioner turned academic, the real struggle is getting engagement recognized, because in the hierarchy, it isn't recognized. And I've been told explicitly that you need to focus on publications. And I'm like, but I will lose out on those relationships. They will not wait for me, but there is no time. So my question, given your agenda and vision, is what kind of support are you envisaging, particularly for those of us at the earlier stages, grappling multiple challenges, where we might be able to do this more effectively in terms of getting that recognition and also the co-creation? Because the other challenge I face is when you work with the communities, there is a lot of research fatigue, because my area of work is around modern slavery and labor rights and all of those issues. So it would be really interesting to hear what you think in your plans for the association. Thank you.
Thank you, and very welcome to your first event. So to the front, please. And then if there's a 3rd question, we'll take that.
Thank you. Joseph Benedek, Country Ambassador for Romania. What are your plans concerning the collaboration with Ayres and RSA? And I know all the efforts made by the RSA to enhance the collaboration and the cooperation with these organizations, but we know exactly that there is not only cooperation, but there is also a kind of competition. Attracting and expanding membership. And looking on the structure of the membership, maybe Ayres and RSAE are more inclusive what concerns the membership from the global south. What are your plans and how do you imagine this cooperation with these 2 organizations? Thank you.
Thank you. I think there was a 3rd hand over here. Yes, sorry. Back.
Very good morning to all of you. Myself, Mukesh Kumar from Department of Economics, Bristol University, India. As a PhD student, I always face the lack of time-series data. So I would like to suggest you that RSA should create a data bank on the regional indicators of agricultural development, urban development. Even there is a FO state and World Bank data, but it should be a RSA database.
Okay, thank you. So, data bank. RSA creating a data bank.
Oh, okay.
So, if you, 3 panelists, if you'd like to respond in whichever way shape you'd like to.
Welcome to our colleague joining us for Regional Studies for the first time. I think your point about spinning all the plates is a pertinent one. I mean, I know from the academic experience in the UK that now we're expected, even at an early career stage, to do it all. Publications, research grants, impacts, administration to some degree. I think my impression is that is relevant globally. We do have an obligation to support people at different career stages. And yesterday at the RSA board, we were talking about mentoring arrangements, maybe hooking up our more experienced colleagues with early careers. I know I have certainly benefited from that in my 20 years with regional studies, learning from esteemed colleagues like John Backler or David Bailey, who, sort of lapping up their words of wisdom and experience and how they engage with policymakers has informed the work that I do. And then we were also thinking about we need to try and ensure that our policy impact work is global. We're a global institution. So how can we maybe use our territorial ambassadors in different parts of the world? And people can use them as gatekeepers as a resource, as a way of entry into these policy worlds. And those are the kind of issues that I think we can do to support people like yourself and others.
So I'll speak to the question, sort of multiple questions around collaboration, particularly with regional science associations. There's some good news here, which is that we've been collaborating with the Regional Science Association colleagues for many years, and we still do. So just a few weeks ago, I was fortunate enough to be in Brussels for the EU Week of Regions and Cities, and attending seminars and sessions that we had jointly planned and laid on. So it's a healthy sign. We also collaborate, as some of you might know, with the Regional Science Association International British and Irish section in publishing spatial economic analysis. And Ugo's sitting here in the audience as editor-in-chief. And again, I was fortunate enough in the summer to attend the RSA IBIS annual conference and was very warmly welcomed. So for somebody coming in, if you like, as a newcomer, it's a very healthy sign for me to see that there are collaborations which are practical already, they're ongoing. One of my early actions, some of you might know, was to visit some of our colleagues in Italy. And again, Ugo was kind enough to introduce me to colleagues from ERSA. So some of my earliest meetings were with colleagues from ERSA. Where's all that goodwill going to go? What will we do with it? I have to say, honestly, sitting here this morning, I don't know yet. The fact that the channels of communication are open is really, for me, a very, very positive signal indeed. And I can't help but wonder, given the conversations that we're having this morning and are going on all the time, really, if you're a busy policymaker, at whatever level you're working, one of the things I know from my own experience over many years is that if a particular field speaks with one voice, or if the messages you're getting are reasonably consistent, then you feel as a policymaker you can act on those. So collaborating on things like policy positions, or what is the evidence beginning to show in policy terms, that can be a very powerful way of working together with other organisations, and an area perhaps where you tend not to compete, but where you can have some work together that's more than the sum of its parts. Those are just thoughts from me at this stage.
Move that way.
Okay, these are your answers. The size of the font of the term represents the times that you entered this as a challenge. So the most central challenge for you is funding. I think it has to do a lot also with what Sarah outlined. Also in the case of Switzerland, the success rates are down to 3%. The national government just announced cuts to research funding. So the success rates will go down further. I think funding is really a central issue that we are facing. I see also a cluster of responses around engagement, recognition, regional, time, then a cluster of, your challenge is research and knowledge. I'm not so sure what you associate with those terms in terms of challenge. Perhaps it's also having the time for research, having sort of the time to develop new knowledge. I see data availability, data collection as answers, and the very small ones, they scatter around. There's more answers. You can push them up, right? You can do a like on some of these, so they get pushed up. Time. So it seems that we live also in a very rushed time where we need attention and we need to take the news to kind of engage with research. So what I would like to ask you to go to the second question, but we need the slide up.
I guess it looks like you've taken my hint. Some of you are using words which are, if you like, tangibles, journals. Others are using abstract sort of thoughts. So, for example, vision, really interesting. Is this an organisation that produces value by charting a vision, charting a way forward, doing that collectively? transdisciplinarity is in there. You see one of the problems with Slido, you have networking and network. They're both fairly large, fairly prominent. If you added them together, you might win the election with that. But there's some things here that aren't necessarily surprising. They do reflect the sorts of things that we were hearing, that have been hearing so far from focus groups around community, collaboration, friendships and networking. We're going to move on to the third question, which is the final question, grand finale, which is back to Sarah.
So what is the most important thing for the RSA to bear in mind as it plans for future strategy? Comments, please, and we'll take a quick roundup. Okay, great. So engagement, impact, hearten to see, opportunities, inclusivity, collaboration seem to be central. Policy engagement, mission orientated, serving its members, next generation. What I'm heartened is that these are elements that we were speaking at the board yesterday about. These are issues that the board in its entirety value and want to move forward, and it feels that we're tapping in to the things that are important to members in the room and our wider community. Just to say that, thank you for your contributions. As Alan says, this is a process of us digesting a series of data or information points that will feed into our strategy. And it's a conversation that we will continue to have with you at next conferences and through different mechanisms. Alan, would you like to say anything by way of roundup, or John?
Thank you, Sarah. So I've just got a couple of things that I'd like to say just to wrap up this opening plenary. Firstly, I'd just like to say thank you for your engagement, and I wish you an enjoyable conference over the next 2 days. I know many of you are presenting and have the opportunity to share your research and your ideas with the audience, and we look forward to hearing the diverse perspectives, interests and contributions to developing and advancing regional studies. The second thing I want to say is that if I can use a little bit of chair's privilege, I was struck by, on Alan's slide, about the goals and objectives for the association going forward. There was a goal around research, there's the goal and objective around policy and practice, and there was one that I might call people, so it's around membership, it's about engagement with people in the community. I'm going to add a fourth one as maybe a little bit of a conversation starter, but also because it links neatly to the plenary this afternoon. So after this, there's coffee. So I appreciate me talking now is the one thing between you and coffee and cakes and pastries. So I will wrap up very shortly. But the second plenary for the conference takes place at 4:15 this afternoon in this room, where the theme is around pedagogies of regional and urban studies. And so that maybe one of the things I would maybe put into the conversation is around the word around education, and thinking about the future of not just regional researchers, but regional policymakers, regional practitioners. And we've obviously got a responsibility as the Regional Studies Association, but also in our day-to-day lives, thinking about nurturing that next generation. So just a kind of early advance notice about that panel, plenary panel this afternoon. Now, finally, I recognise lots of faces in the audience, which is great. So I'm going to ask you, if you've attended 5 or more RSA events in your lifetime, can you put your hands up, please? Brilliant. Right. Can you keep your hands up? I would like you to look around the room, because we have lots of new people who are either first attendees or have engaged with the RSA, maybe slightly less, and you're obviously very, very welcome. What I would like to challenge you, if you've got your hand up, is not just to go out and have coffee and talk to each other, but I'd like you to have a look around the room, because there are a lot of people here who are new to the RSA, and we obviously want to welcome them and include them in all the conversations. So my challenge is to you, when you go out for coffee, please identify somebody close to you that doesn't have their hand up, and it would be delightful if you go and talk to them. Now, notice there's 4 of us on the stage. I don't know if 4 of us put our hands up. I didn't, but my hand is up as well. Please come and talk to us, and please do enjoy yourself, and we wish you a productive and enjoyable conference. So thank you very much.